Dance this tango and I'll marry you right here." Alexander Carter's voice echoed across the ballroom, his words dripping with arrogance. The crowd roared with laughter. Champagne glasses clinked. All eyes turned to the poor maid standing frozen in her uniform. Would she run? Would she collapse in shame? No one expected what came next, and the secret she carried would soon shock everyone. Before we begin this emotional story, tell us in the comments from which city you are watching, and don't forget to leave your like to keep following us. The chandeliers trembled with 1,000 shards of light, scattering golden reflections across marble floors polished to a mirror's shine. The orchestra's strings swelled, filling the air with the rhythm of a tango. Guests in silk gowns and starched white gloves circled the ballroom, murmuring with delight as they watched New York's elite glide across the floor. Yet the music dimmed in Emma's ears, for every gaze had turned toward her. She stood frozen at the edge of the dance floor, clutching her apron with trembling fingers. Her dark uniform clashed against the pastel elegance of the guests, making her look like a shadow among butterflies. And there in front of her, with a glass of champagne in his hand and arrogance curling at his lips, was Alexander Carter, the billionaire CEO whose name alone commanded fear in Wall Street's corridors. "Come on, maid," Alex's voice rang, smooth but cutting, meant to slice her pride in front of everyone. "You polish silver well enough, but can you handle a tango?" He extended his hand theatrically, bowing slightly, as the crowd laughed and whispered. His challenge wasn't an invitation, it was a mockery dressed in charm. Emma's chest tightened. She had been trained to be invisible, to walk silently between crystal glasses and velvet chairs, never daring to meet the eyes of the rich. Yet tonight, Alexander Carter had dragged her into the spotlight like a moth pinned under glass. Her cheeks burned, not from shame, but from the raw sting of humiliation. I can't," she whispered, shaking her head. Her voice cracked, nearly swallowed by the violins. "This isn't my place," Alex smirked, stepping closer until she could smell the faint cologne of cedar and smoke on his jacket. "Oh, but it is. Dance this tango with me, Emma." He had remembered her name from the staff list, deliberately twisting it on his tongue for effect, "and I'll marry you right here, in front of everyone." The room erupted in cruel laughter, champagne glasses clinking like bells of mockery. The words sliced through her. Marry her. Everyone knew it was a joke, a cruel spectacle for the rich to enjoy, yet his eyes, sharp and unyielding, challenged her to resist. Around them, whispers flew like arrows. "She won't dare. She'll run." Emma's nails dug into her palms. She wanted to flee, to disappear into the safety of the kitchen where no one's gaze could scorch her. But something inside her, something long buried beneath years of silence and servitude, refused to let him have the last word. She lifted her chin slowly, her voice steadier now, though her hands still shook. "If I accept," she said, her gaze piercing his with quiet defiance, "I won't be the one embarrassed." The laughter dimmed into murmurs. A shift rippled through the room. Alexander's smile faltered for the briefest second, as if her words had struck deeper than he expected. The orchestra paused on a lingering note, and the ballroom held its breath. And then, with the chandeliers blazing above them, Emma placed her trembling hand in his. The violins struck again, sharper this time, as if sensing the storm brewing on the marble floor. The guests leaned forward, eager for the spectacle, a billionaire CEO dragging a poor maid into his world, only to laugh as she stumbled and fell. Emma felt the weight of their eyes pressing against her skin like hot coals, but she didn't retreat. Her hand trembled in Alexander's, yet her gaze held his with an intensity that unsettled even him. He pulled her closer with a swift motion, the sudden force making her apron sway. "Relax," he whispered, his tone laced with mockery that only she could hear. "This isn't about you dancing. It's about reminding everyone what happens when a maid dares to touch a Carter." His lips curved into that cruel, perfect smile, polished for boardrooms and cameras. Emma's throat tightened, but she didn't look away. The music demanded steps, sharp, precise, intimate. Her shoes weren't made for dancing, only for long hours of silent service. Yet as Alexander spun her into the first turn, something stirred within her muscles, something she hadn't felt in years. Her body remembered. She followed his lead with a grace that surprised even herself, her skirt swirling against the polished marble as if it had always belonged there. The crowd gasped lightly, first amused, then intrigued. The laughter faltered, replaced by murmurs of confusion. Alexander, feeling her sudden rhythm, pressed harder, his steps sharper, testing her. He wanted her to trip, to collapse under the weight of his game. But Emma did not. Her eyes locked on his, unflinching, every step a quiet defiance. Each turn, each sway became sharper, as though she were speaking a language no one expected her to know. The chandeliers shimmered above her, casting firelight into her eyes, making her seem almost untouchable. Alexander leaned in, his voice low, his breath brushing her ear. "Where did you learn this?" His arrogance cracked, curiosity seeping through like water through stone. Emma's lips curved into the faintest smile, though her chest still hammered with fear. "Not here, not in your world." The answer unsettled him. He tightened his grip, leading her into a daring dip, expecting her to falter. Instead, she bent with effortless poise, her hair brushing against the marble before she rose again in perfect rhythm. Gasps echoed through the room, no longer mocking, now stunned. The billionaire CEO who had mocked the maid was suddenly the one struggling to keep control. His jaw clenched, his pride bruised by every flawless step she matched. The audience no longer laughed. They stared, wide-eyed, as Emma's quiet rebellion unfolded under the golden chandeliers. And when the tango reached its fevered crescendo, Alexander found himself asking, not for her humiliation, but for her secret. The violins slashed the air with furious strokes, filling the ballroom with a rhythm that pulsed like a heartbeat, on the verge of breaking. Alexander's grip tightened on Emma's waist, guiding her with an authority that had crushed rivals in boardrooms. Yet here on the marble floor beneath blazing chandeliers, he was no longer in full control. Emma's every step defied him. Her feet moved with precision, her posture upright, her chin lifted in quiet defiance. The soft cotton of her maid's uniform brushed against the silk of his tailored tuxedo, a contrast so stark that even the most jaded guests felt their throats tighten. "Who are you, really?" Alexander hissed, forcing her into a swift spin. He wanted her to stumble, to reveal the clumsy servant she was supposed to be, but she returned to his arms with flawless timing, her eyes burning into his. "I told you," she whispered, her lips barely moving. "I don't belong in your world." Yet her body told another story. Each step was memory, an echo of nights long past, of melodies played not in gilded halls, but in cramped studios where she once danced until her feet bled. No one here knew. No one had ever cared. Gasps rippled through the room as Emma broke the usual submissive flow of the tango. Instead of letting Alexander dictate the steps, she seized control for a fleeting moment, leading him into a sharp cross-step that caught even him off guard. The crowd leaned forward, their disbelief painted across jeweled faces. She's leading him," someone whispered. Alexander's jaw tightened, the smirk fading into something darker. He wasn't used to being challenged, least of all by someone in an apron. His reputation rested on dominance, on power, on never being the one caught off balance. And yet, under the chandeliers, the billionaire CEO found himself fighting for dignity against a woman everyone had deemed invisible. "Enough," he muttered, trying to force her back into his rhythm. But Emma's eyes glistened, not with fear, this time with something fiercer. "You wanted a show," she said softly. "Now watch." The orchestra swelled, violins screaming as the tango spiraled toward its climax. Emma's body moved as though the music had always lived within her. The murmurs of mockery had turned to silence, and silence into awe. And then came the twist. Emma broke from his hold, spinning away just long enough to leave Alexander standing alone in the center of the floor, his hand empty. The crowd gasped. No maid was ever supposed to take such liberty. But she turned back, returning with a fluid grace, sliding into his arms again as though daring him to admit what everyone now saw. She was no longer his pawn. And for the first time, Alexander Carter, who had mocked her in front of the city's elite, felt the sting of being the one judged. The orchestra's final notes blazed like fire, echoing through the vast ballroom. Emma and Alexander froze in their last pose, his hand gripping her waist, her chest rising and falling against his, eyes locked in a silent war. For a heartbeat, the world was still. Then came the sound, applause. But it wasn't polite applause. It wasn't the laughter Alexander had expected when he first mocked her. It was thunderous, hesitant at first, then growing, filling the crystal-lit hall with astonishment. The elite of New York, men and women who never wasted admiration on anyone beneath them, were clapping for a maid. Alexander's jaw tensed. This was not his plan. Emma stepped back, lowering her gaze briefly, not in submission, but to shield herself from the piercing stares of the crowd. Yet among the applause, a voice cut through like a blade. "Wait, I know her." The room fell silent again. Heads turned toward the speaker, an older man in a tailored navy suit, his silver hair gleaming under the chandeliers. His wife clutched his arm, her eyes wide as recognition washed over her. "That's not just a maid," the man said, stepping forward. His words trembled with certainty. "That's Emma Collins. She was the rising star of the New York Academy of Dance." Gasps rippled like a wave across the marble floor. Emma's breath caught. Her past, something she had buried deep beneath years of servitude, was dragged into the open under the merciless glow of crystal light. "She disappeared," the man continued, almost to himself. "A prodigy. She vanished from the stage years ago, and now—" His voice faltered as he took in her apron and uniform. "She's here? Cleaning floors?" Alexander's eyes narrowed, darting back to Emma. For the first time that evening, it wasn't mockery burning in his gaze, but confusion, and something dangerously close to respect. Emma's hands clenched at her sides, her knuckles white. The weight of every whispered question pressed against her. Why did she leave? What happened to her? How did she fall so far? She wanted to vanish into the shadows of the kitchen again, but the same fire that had carried her through the tango now held her ground. She lifted her chin, letting the silence stretch. Her voice, when it came, was steady, carrying across the ballroom. "Yes," she said, "I was Emma Collins, the dancer, and now I am the maid." The truth struck harder than any denial. The crowd stood in stunned silence, torn between awe and disbelief. Alexander, still holding her gaze, felt the balance of power slip further from his hands. For the first time in years, it was not Emma who felt exposed. It was Alexander Carter, the billionaire CEO, mocked by his own challenge, and Emma had just turned his game into her stage. The applause had dissolved into a tense, electric silence. Emma stood at the center of the ballroom, her maid's uniform a cruel reminder of how far she had fallen. The name Emma Collins still lingered in the air, whispered like a ghost among jeweled throats. Alexander Carter adjusted his cufflinks, his mask of arrogance slipping back into place. He refused to let her steal the stage completely. "So," he said smoothly, his voice carrying across the marble hall, "our little maid has a past." He paced around her like a predator circling prey, though his eyes betrayed unease. "A prodigy who vanished, and somehow ended up scrubbing floors in my house." Laughter rippled nervously among the guests, forced, brittle. They didn't know whether to mock or admire. Alexander thrived on that uncertainty. Emma's hands trembled, but her voice remained firm. "You wanted to humiliate me. But what's worse, Mr. Carter? To be a maid with dignity, or a billionaire who uses his wealth to break others?" The words struck sharper than any blade. A few in the crowd gasped, others shifted uncomfortably. Alexander's jaw tightened, but before he could respond, a woman in the front, tall, wrapped in emerald silk, spoke out. "I remember her too," the woman said. Her eyes glistened, though her tone was sharper than sympathy. Emma Collins, she had everything, the talent, the fame, the contracts. And then, she threw it away. Rumors said she was reckless, scandalous, that she betrayed her sponsors. The ballroom erupted with whispers. Scandal, betrayal. Those words spread like fire across velvet and glass. Emma felt their sting, sharper than any humiliation Alexander could deliver. She closed her eyes for a heartbeat, forcing her breath steady. When she opened them again, she met the woman's gaze directly. "No," Emma said softly. "I didn't betray anyone. I was betrayed." The orchestra, now silent, seemed to echo her words in the emptiness between the chandeliers. For the first time, Alexander stopped moving. He studied her, his smirk fading as he sensed the crack in her armor was not weakness, but truth. Emma stepped forward, her voice carrying not with volume, but with the weight of something long hidden. I lost everything in one night, not because I failed, but because someone made sure I would disappear. The murmurs swelled again, sharper this time. Suspicion, curiosity, disbelief. Emma's revelation hung heavy, a riddle clawing at the edges of the glittering hall. Alexander Carter, billionaire CEO, mocked her as a maid to entertain his guests. Yet now he found himself standing beside a woman whose secret hinted at corruption, betrayal, and perhaps something darker than either of them could control. And the guests, hungry for scandal, would not let the night end without answers. The ballroom had transformed into a theater, every jeweled gaze fixed on Emma as though she were the evening's main performance. The crystal chandeliers glittered coldly above, reflecting not joy but hunger. Hunger for scandal, for the unraveling of someone else's dignity. "Who betrayed you?" a man demanded from the crowd, his voice cutting through the murmurs. His face was flushed from wine, but his tone carried the sharpness of curiosity sharpened into cruelty. "If you're going to stand here and accuse, tell us who destroyed your career." Emma's throat constricted. Her palms grew damp, but she kept her gaze steady. She could feel Alexander's eyes burning into her, searching, calculating. "Enough," Alexander interjected, stepping between her and the crowd. His voice was smooth, commanding, the way it sounded in boardrooms when silencing opposition. "She's just a maid spinning a sob story. Let's not ruin a beautiful evening with her little drama." But his dismissal only fueled the fire. Whispers surged louder. Why defend her? What does he know? Emma took a breath, her chest rising with the weight of years she had carried in silence. She looked past Alexander, her voice trembling but unbroken. It wasn't just anyone. It was someone powerful. Someone who wanted me erased. Contracts cancelled overnight. Sponsors turning their backs. My name dragged through the mud. Gasps punctured the air. The guests leaned in, as if her words had magnetic force. Alexander clenched his jaw. He could feel the atmosphere shifting against him. He hadn't expected resistance, not from her. He had wanted a spectacle, an easy humiliation, not this unveiling of shadows that threatened to pull him in. "And now," Emma continued, her eyes locking onto his, "now I clean floors for the same kind of men who destroyed me." Her words landed heavy, dripping with accusation. A hush fell so deep it seemed the chandeliers themselves listened. From the back, a woman's sharp voice broke the silence. "If she's telling the truth, then someone here might be hiding something." Heads turned. Suspicion rippled across the golden hall like a crack racing through glass. Alexander's grip on his champagne glass tightened until his knuckles whitened. His empire thrived on control, on secrets buried beneath contracts and power. And yet tonight, one maid's voice threatened to split it wide open. Emma stood taller, no longer trembling. Her secret was not fully revealed, but the weight of her truth pressed against everyone in the room. And Alexander Carter, for the first time, realized the danger was not in her being a maid. The danger was in her finally speaking. The golden hall seemed to pulse with unease, as though even the chandeliers trembled under the weight of the silence. Alexander Carter stepped closer to Emma, his tuxedo brushing against her maid's uniform, the sharp contrast between them more striking than ever. His voice dropped low, meant for her alone, though the crowd strained to catch every word. "Enough," he hissed, his breath warm against her ear. "You've had your little moment. Say another word, and I'll make sure you never work in this city again, not even as a maid." Emma's lips parted, trembling not from fear but from the fury rising in her chest. His threats no longer pierced her the way they once would have. Instead, they fanned the fire. She lifted her chin, meeting his eyes with a quiet defiance that unsettled him more than open rebellion. "Do you think I care about your city?" she whispered back, her voice trembling yet sharp as broken glass. "You've already taken everything from me. What else is there left to lose?" Alexander blinked. For a fraction of a second, his mask cracked. He wasn't used to being challenged, certainly not by someone he had dragged from the shadows to humiliate. He expected tears, begging, silence. Instead, he was met with a woman whose pain had calcified into strength. The guests shifted uneasily. The silence was suffocating, thick with tension. Then Emma's voice rose, not loud, but clear enough for all to hear. "You want to know who betrayed me?" she said, her eyes sweeping the room, lingering on the jeweled faces that had once adored her on stage. It wasn't just one man. It was a network, a system built to protect men like him. A murmur swept the hall, sharper than any applause. Emma's eyes snapped back to Alexander. Men who think money is enough to bury the truth, men who ruin lives for entertainment, men who laugh while others burn. Alexander froze, every syllable cutting closer than she should have known. His guests turned toward him, whispers igniting like sparks in dry wood. Was she implying him? Had Carter been part of it? He forced a laugh, though it came out strained, brittle. "Listen to her, our poor maid turned tragic heroine." He lifted his glass, trying to rally the room back to mockery. She should take this act to Broadway. But no one laughed. For the first time, the billionaire CEO realized the crowd wasn't fully with him anymore. Their eyes, once loyal, now flickered with suspicion, curiosity, even admiration for her. Emma took a step forward, her voice steady now, her gaze fixed on him like a blade. "You wanted me to dance, Alexander Carter. I did. But you forgot one thing about the tango." She paused, letting the silence stretch, every guest holding their breath. "It always takes two." And in that moment, everyone saw it. Not a maid bowing to her master, but a woman standing toe-to-toe with the most powerful man in the room, threatening to expose the cracks in his empire. A silence heavier than marble pressed over the ballroom. Emma's words still hung in the air, sharp as shattered glass. "It always takes two." The guests shifted uneasily, their jeweled eyes flickering between her and Alexander. The orchestra had long gone silent, their instruments resting like abandoned weapons, leaving only the sound of breathing and the faint clink of champagne glasses against trembling hands. Alexander Carter's jaw tightened. His polished mask, the one that had won him contracts, boardrooms, and enemies' submission, began to crack. For the first time in years, he wasn't the one controlling the narrative. He wasn't the one dictating the script, and it infuriated him. With a sudden motion, he grabbed Emma's wrist, pulling her closer. Gasps erupted, sharp and collective, as if the entire room had inhaled at once. "Careful," he whispered, though his voice was harsher now, stripped of charm. "You're playing a dangerous game. Do you know what happens to people who try to ruin me?" Emma didn't flinch. The heat of his grip seared her skin, but her gaze never wavered. "I already know," she said softly, "because it happened to me." The crowd's whispers flared louder, a storm brewing beneath the glitter. Words hissed through the air, threats, scandal, Carter's temper, things they'd never dared speak before. Alexander's chest heaved, his breath uneven. He could feel the balance of power slipping from his grasp, and worse, he could see it in their eyes. The guests weren't laughing anymore. They weren't entertained. They were watching, judging, waiting. "Let her go," a voice called from the crowd, a man in a charcoal suit, someone Alexander recognized as a rival investor. "You've gone too far, Carter." For the briefest second, Alexander faltered. He looked around and saw it. Suspicion, disapproval, even contempt. His empire wasn't crumbling yet, but the cracks were spreading fast. Emma pulled her wrist free, the force of her movement sharp enough to make his fingers snap back. She stood tall, her maid's uniform wrinkled, her cheeks flushed, but her dignity intact. "You wanted me small," she said, her voice carrying across the marble like a blade slicing silk. "Invisible. But tonight, Alexander, everyone sees you for what you are." The ballroom froze. Even the chandeliers seemed to hold their breath. Alexander's eyes burned, his pride wounded deeper than any business loss. He stepped back, his fists curling, the weight of the crowd's judgment pressing against him. For the first time in years, the billionaire CEO had been cornered, not by another magnate, but by the poor maid he tried to humiliate. And then, before anyone could move, Emma spoke the words that shattered the night. "I know the truth about what you did." The crowd erupted, gasps and murmurs colliding into chaos. Alexander's face paled, his arrogance stripped bare. And suddenly it wasn't just Emma who stood exposed in the ballroom, it was him. The ballroom trembled with whispers, a hive of restless voices echoing beneath the chandeliers. All eyes were locked on Emma, standing in her plain maid's uniform, her chest rising and falling with the weight of the words she had just unleashed. "I know the truth about what you did." Alexander Carter's jaw clenched. He forced a smirk, though the tension in his shoulders betrayed the strain. "Do enlighten us, Emma," he said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "What terrible thing have I supposedly done to you?" But his confidence rang hollow. The guests sensed it. They leaned forward, hungry, their diamonds glinting like watchful eyes. Emma's gaze swept the crowd, then returned to Alexander. Her voice shook at first, but steadied with each word. "Years ago, when I was still Emma Collins the dancer, I was offered a contract. That chance to tour, to become what I had trained for since I was a child. But there were conditions, ugly ones, conditions I refused." A murmur rippled through the hall. Emma's fingers curled tightly at her sides. "That contract came from one of your shell companies, Mr. Carter," she continued, her voice sharper now. "You thought no one would trace it back to you, but I know. When I said no, you made a call. By the next morning, every sponsor had cut ties with me. My name was smeared in the press. Rumors, reckless, scandalous, ungrateful. Words you planted. Gasps erupted. A woman dropped her champagne flute, the glass shattering against the marble. Alexander's face darkened, but before he could speak, another guest, an older man with a crooked tie, nodded slowly. I remember that story. The sudden fall, the whispers. And Carter." He turned to face Alexander, his eyes narrowing. "You were just starting out then, hungry for power. You would have done anything to prove yourself." The room swelled with murmurs, accusations, doubt. The billionaire CEO's polished image began to crumble before their eyes. Emma took a step closer, her voice steady now, cutting through the chaos. "You didn't just ruin my career, you took away my future because I dared to say no. You thought I'd disappear, and I did, until tonight." Alexander's mask shattered. His smirk vanished, replaced by a flash of raw panic. "She lies," he snapped, his voice harsher than ever. "She's nothing but a maid desperate for attention." But the room was no longer his. The crowd had turned. Their eyes, once filled with admiration, now glittered with suspicion, even contempt. And as Emma stood tall in the center of the marble floor, it was no longer her shame that defined the night. It was his. The silence that followed Emma's words was deafening. The chandeliers, once dazzling, now seemed to cast a harsher, colder light over Alexander Carter's face. His chest rose and fell too quickly, the mask of control slipping with every second the crowd's eyes bore into him. "She's lying," he shouted, his voice cracking in a way no one had ever heard from the billionaire CEO. He slammed his glass onto the nearest table, shattering it into a spray of crystal. "This is nothing but a maid's fantasy. You all know me." But the room did not rally to him. Not this time. The laughter and applause he had always commanded were gone, replaced with suspicion that cut sharper than knives. Murmurs swirled, contracts, cover-ups, Carter's temper. The empire he had built on intimidation and charm now trembled before the judgment of his peers. Emma stood still, her apron wrinkled, her shoes worn, yet her presence filled the ballroom. "For years, you made me invisible," she said, her voice calm, almost gentle. "But tonight, everyone sees you. Not the millionaire CEO with the perfect smile, just a man who destroyed a life because his pride couldn't handle rejection." The guests drew back from Alexander, creating space around him as though his arrogance were a contagion. Even his closest allies avoided his gaze. He stood alone at the center of the marble floor, exposed, humiliated, stripped of the invincibility he had worn like armor. Emma's hand trembled slightly, but she did not let it show. She turned toward the doors of the ballroom, each step echoing like a verdict. Her back was straight, her chin lifted. She wasn't a maid fleeing in shame. She was a woman reclaiming her dignity in front of the very world that had stolen it. A few of the guests, hesitant at first, then bolder, began to clap. Not mockery this time, respect, solidarity. The applause grew, rippling through the hall until it filled the air like thunder. Alexander staggered, his fists clenched, his face pale. The applause wasn't for him. It never would be again. Emma did not look back. She crossed the ballroom, her shadow stretching beneath the glittering chandeliers, and as the great doors opened, letting in the night air, she stepped through, not as the maid mocked by a billionaire, but as the woman who had exposed him. Behind her the music swelled again, not from the orchestra, but from the rhythm of hearts that had been moved. The tango was over, and she had won. The night ended not with the billionaire's triumph, but with his humiliation. Alexander Carter, once untouchable, stood exposed beneath the chandeliers, stripped of the power he thought could silence the truth. Emma, the maid he tried to mock, walked away, not as a servant, but as a woman who reclaimed her dignity. She didn't need revenge, nor his fortune. What she carried was far greater: the strength to stand tall, the courage to speak, and the freedom that comes with truth. In a world that worships wealth and mocks the humble, her quiet defiance reminded everyone of something priceless. Dignity cannot be bought, and respect cannot be stolen. Thank you for staying with us until the end of this heart-touching story. Tell us in the comments which part moved you the most. Subscribe and turn on the bell to receive more stories that inspire and transform. Leave a like if you believe in the invisible strength of dignity and family. And above all, thank you for being part of this community that believes in stories with soul. And before you go, watch the story I leave here on the left. I'm sure it will also move you and make you reflect.